Welcome back to our 5 Things series, where we talk about everything related to offshore investing. Really excited to have Brandon Naidoo in the room. And today we're going to talk about what do you do once you've considered to go offshore. As a reminder, in our first series, we spoke about why consider offshore in the first place. Today, we'll be talking about once you've considered offshore, what are the different opportunities that you've got available to you? And in looking at the different opportunities, how do you practically access the offshore market? So welcome, Brandon. Really great to have you in studio with us. If a client is looking for options to invest offshore, what would they need to consider and what options are available for them?
Mira, I think that's a great starting point in terms of you've made the decision to go offshore, but how? How do you go offshore? And the words I hear being thrown around quite a lot is, do I use the direct route or the indirect route? So let me explain that. When we talk about the direct route, it means in hard currency, I want to invest offshore. So be that in dollar or euro or pound, that is the currency of the investment I'd like to place offshore. Indirect, on the other hand, means I'd like to do a rand-based investment and make use of the facilities of the service provider in terms of their allowances in taking funds offshore. We'll talk a bit about allowances later on, but just to distinguish between direct and indirect. Direct means hard currency, essentially, whereas indirect means a rand-based investment taken offshore. And I think that's a good starting point to talk about. I've made the decision to go offshore, but how do I go there?
That's great, and that's very informative. Thank you, Brandon. There's a perception out in the market that offshore investing is only really available for the wealthy, for the high net worth individual that's got lump sums available and the ability and the capabilities and resources to invest offshore. Do you think that perception is there any truth in that? Can you expand a little bit on how an ordinary investor can access offshore investing?
No, that's valid for me. I think the question of offshore being only for the wealthy comes up quite often. And I'd like to say that it's not only available to the wealthy, simply because your entry points vary. You can access offshore in an investment account from, or a so-called unit trust as it's more colloquially known, in the indirect option from 500 Rand a month. Whereas if you'd like to access an offshore endowment via the direct means of so-called hard currency, dollar, pound, euro, etc., you can access that from $15,000. So I think that those levels should indicate to us that it's available to a broad spectrum of clients just based on affordability. And I think that notion of offshore being just for the wealthy is something that we must try very hard to dispel.
No, of course. And I think that's valuable. Thank you, Brandon. The global environment is currently extremely volatile. I think it all started back in 2019, 2020. And then we saw, outside of COVID, there's a whole lot of geopolitical risk within our own country. We've got some political risks. We've got some social risks. We've got some economic risks. I mean, we are not independent of what's happening out there globally, but we do have our own local issues as well. And that impacts the way foreign investors look at us, but it also impacts our views on what opportunities there are offshore. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about, demystifying that complexity? Is it the right time to go offshore?
I mean, whenever we start talking about a volatility, I think we've been spoiled. We've been spoiled ever since GFC of 2008, where we went through a decade of zero interest rates and free money essentially being pumped into the system. And we saw, if I can call it, stable markets for a rather long period of time. COVID jolted that, obviously, the pressure applied on supply chains. And then, as you mentioned, geopolitical tension in Russia and Ukraine. And now the banking crisis that's currently ripping through the world. Those have been jolts to the system. I think inflation is the big problem of today, and an increasing interest rate environment that we're in means that what worked years ago is not really working today. And that's the volatility that people are seeing and experiencing. And I think the point for us to note, and the point that we need to be comfortable with, is it's not volatility that's uncommon. It's the decade that we went through with zero interest rates and free money being pumped into the system that's uncommon. So I'm saying a boom and bust cycle is natural. It's natural in markets, and it's what we've seen over hundreds of years. But when we zoom out, what do we see? We see a chart starting bottom left and ending top right, generally. So I'm saying that within the volatility that clients are experiencing, within the discomfort, there'll always be sectors, stocks, industries that are offering value. And it's therein that clients need to take comfort that the boom and bust cycle of markets will continue, and this is just another occasion after.
Yeah, as you point out, from the great financial crisis, we then had a period of quite significant bull markets. And what you're saying, Brandon, is volatility is actually normal and sometimes even necessary, and that we should ride the wave for the long term. I think that makes sense. Let's just change gears a little bit. You did say, global investing isn't for the wealthy. it's perceived to be quite expensive. And, with so many options in the market, how important is it for investors to actually understand how much they're paying, what costs are associated with it, and, is there anything they need to look for?
Whenever the question of cost comes about, I feel as if we can quickly go into a conversation about active management and index investing or passive.
Sure.
But before we go there, because we will go there, but before we go there, I'd like to say that when you're thinking about costs, yes, the total investment charge is important, or your so-called portfolio fee, but there's also an administration fee that you pay for the platform that you're on. There's also an advice fee to be considered. So when we think about costs, it's that holistic cost that we need to bear in mind. But also there's value associated with paying across certain fees, right? So we need to think about the value that we get and the cost that we're paying for that. Let's talk about the index versus active debate, which I'm hoping is coming to an end now, because I think by and large, people realize that there is a place for both passive investments and active investments. And regardless of the approach that you end up using, whether it's a core and satellite approach where you've got your index investments at your core and your active solutions are satellites around that, or whether you decide that for your longer term investments, you want to use index, for your shorter term, you want to use active, whether you decide to go through a single manager or a multi-managed approach, all of these decisions you would make with a financial advisor at your side to help you decide what's best for you at a specific point in time. So I think when we're talking about costs and we go into this conversation about index investment and active investments, there are a number of options available to you. And it's just about making the right decision for you to bring about the overall goals that you're looking to achieve.
Thank you, Brandon. I think you quite appropriately, picked on quite a valid point. Even as we try and simplify this conversation, once you decide to make the plunge, there are some big decisions to be made. You spoke about the currency risk and hedging currency risk. You spoke about the sectors and sector allocations outside of South Africa. You spoke about the different geographies, and there are implications such as cost and fees. There are different asset managers out there. There's a lot of decisions to be made. So now I'm an investor and I want to take the plunge. How do I do that? And is there any help out there for me?
Yeah, I think help's an important concept, right? So I think the financial advisor would naturally be your first point of call. But let's not think of the financial advisor existing in a vacuum. The financial advisor is supported by specialists in different areas. So you spoke about doing geographical diversification, asset class diversification, even manager diversification. And I think about within our group, the Innate Invest team, who do due diligence operationally, due diligence on an investment basis, undergo all of the research globally when you're thinking about global investments in our context here. So you've got a specialist in the room, if I can call it, when it comes to doing your actual investments. Think about the partnership that Stanlib has recently struck up with JP Morgan Asset Management. I mean, that is a behemoth in global terms, and we've got a direct partnership with them. So that's another example of getting a specialist in the room to support the advisor and support the client. But it goes beyond that. We really want to make the lives of our clients as simple and as easy as possible. So funding your offshore investments could bring about some complexity, right? Who do you go to for Forex? How do you fund it? Do you need tax clearance? Who provides you the tax clearance? And within our offshore ecosystem at Liberty, I'm saying we've got service providers that will firstly do your foreign exchange for you, right? Thereafter assist you with getting the funds offshore. Thereafter assist you with the tax clearance. So when you get all of these experts in the room, as it were, I think it really does enable the client journey to be much simpler, much easier, much faster, and improve their overall experience.
So whether you're a seasoned investor or just starting out, Liberty has all of the solutions for you to help diversify your investments and grow your wealth. Liberty is invested in it with you, and we are passionate about going global together.